In what is easily one of the most anticipated video games of 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 is finally here. With constant delays, questionable marketing decisions, and an incredible amount of ambition, let's see just how the final product turned out. As the name suggests, Cyberpunk 2077 takes place in the cybernetic enhanced grim future of 2077. You play as V, an underdog mercenary and criminal with varying backgrounds depending on your choice. You can be a nomad traveling to Night City, a street kid growing up from the poor sub-communities of Night City, or a corpo background. Regardless of your main background, your main storyline is primarily the same with some different dialogue choices that only appear for certain backgrounds. Regardless of your path, you arrive at Night City, this bustling metropolis of the future that's smaller than the world of The Witcher 3, but more densely populated. It's through a series of jobs and incredibly wild circumstances that V finds themselves now being invaded by the psyche of the 2023 rockstar turned corporate terrorist, Johnny Silverhand, played by Keanu Reeves. Together the two fight or work together to fix the predicament they find themselves in. For a game and story that takes place in an open world, Cyberpunk 2077's narrative was surprisingly linear. Yes, there's plenty of side quests and extra bits of lore for you to discover should you invest the time to travel down those paths. However, the main storyline can be easily beaten in 20 to 30 hours. In my playtime, I invested plenty of hours into side quests, and though I love learning about Night City and its people, I couldn't help but shake the feeling that these missions felt badly organized or paced. Some of the most pivotal and iconic moments in Cyberpunk's story came in the form of side quests that would pop up through phone calls during moments where it didn't feel fitting to the main story at all. The content themselves were great, even fantastic, but the ordering of events and the overlays of those events, marking them as main and side quests, felt unorganized in many instances, making me come to think just how the biggest moments in Cyberpunk could be completely missed with this structure. Cyberpunk 2077 is an open-world RPG diving into the lowlives of this densely populated city dominated by the wealthy equipped with high-end tech on their side. It's a world with a ton of promise that delivers on some of the fronts, but drops the ball on others. I believe the best example is Night City, arguably one of the best sprawling locations with not very much to do in it. Now don't get me wrong, there's plenty of side quests and main quests all around Night City. These missions will take you from the outskirts of town to the tallest towers downtown. However, these missions are constantly given to you without searching for them. Whereas in other staple RPGs like The Witcher, you could go and explore an area, get to know some NPCs, and possibly earn a quest that further unlocks more of their story. In Cyberpunk, it's usually more of someone randomly getting a hold of your phone number, calling you with a new mission or a job proposal. And while convenient, it takes away from the sense of exploration that comes from looking throughout Night City and being rewarded with new content and lore. In that sense, despite Night City being a visually amazing place to want to explore, I didn't feel like I had the means to do so. I couldn't just be a citizen of the city, wander off and do a minigame or partake in one of Night City's many attractions that are more for show than for entertainment. This feeling continued on to the character creation, which does give you toggles for features most games don't give you, like genitalia, sure. But outside of those outliers, the character creator is surprisingly bare. Being a game about the cyberpunk genre, where body modification is the norm, it's weird that you're not able to change the size of, let's say, facial features, or have more hairstyles actively available, or even just be able to change your look after the start of the game. Not being able to change the way a character looks in the cyberpunk game seems a bit backwards. With that said, Cyberpunk 2077 does do a lot right. The gameplay is displayed in a first-person view with the FPS combat. It's apparent that the gameplay isn't the best when compared to other modern shooters, but it does a good enough job for this RPG's case. Where the gameplay does flesh out is in its upgrade system that allows for cybernetic modifications like the ability to hack other people or everyday electronics. This translates to being able to temporarily blind optical body modifications or shut down security systems when on a mission. Depending on what you invest your experience points into, you can, let's say, focus on brains and being hacker that avoids the combat by stealthily avoiding it, or perhaps you raise your strength that lets you just break down locked doors altogether. That choice and variety on how you not only develop V through dialogue choices but by the gameplay type ultimately helped V feel like my own unique character as opposed to the other millions playing this game. What didn't feel too unique was how the weapons were handled. Adopting a somewhat service game-like style of having a damage status for each weapon along with the color that labels their rarity, I never really felt like any of the weapons were my own. I never grew attached to any of the weapons I earned because by the time I got said weapon, a new better weapon would be dropped by an enemy I just defeated, and it's for that same reason I really didn't bother crafting many weapons. This felt like the overall theme of Cyberpunk 2077, a game with high ambitions that didn't fully deliver on their vision. Now that's not to say Cyberpunk 2077 isn't fun or entertaining. I love driving through Night City, experiencing V's story, and getting to know the civilians around me. However, moments like when I cause a crime and get the police on my track only to have them completely forget about me moments later break my immersion. Enemy AI just standing, not attacking me or glitching through the environment broke my immersion too. The little but consistent issues like these constantly found their way into my campaign that felt like constant blemishes on an otherwise great painting. Let's just get this out of the way. If you're currently on a base Xbox One or PS4, then you probably should be playing Cyberpunk 2077. The experience is currently a mess with 20 frames per second gameplay and bugs either causing hilarious looking glitches or crashing the game entirely. It almost feels like the Witcher 3 port on Nintendo Switch, only way buggier and unplayable. The base PS4 runs at a dynamic resolution ranging between 720p and 900p, though usually hovering more towards the former. It only struggles more on the base Xbox One and Xbox One S hardware. Where it becomes a bit more bearable is on the enhanced last-gen Pro consoles PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. PS4 Pro runs at a dynamic 1080p that pretty much stays locked at 1080p whenever you're looking at anything that isn't the sky. Frame rates range from 20 to 30 FPS, being slightly better than the base PS4 but still struggling to run many of the scenes in the game. Xbox One X on the other hand is perhaps what most people would have expected to see from last-gen consoles. It runs at a more stable 1080p dynamic resolution at 30 frames per second that hovers around that target more reliably than any of the other consoles mentioned so far. Of course, if you are planning to play on a console, you will get the best experience on next-generation consoles. It should be noted that Cyberpunk is running on next-gen platforms through backwards compatibility though, so the game isn't fully taking advantage of the better hardware just yet, although you do see some performance buffs here. PS5 runs Cyberpunk at a dynamic 1188p down to 972p with the target frame rate of 60 frames per second that does a pretty good job at staying locked there, or at least in the high 50s. Visually, it's not going to be on par with your PC counterparts, but in terms of performance, it's one of the best experiences on the console side for the time being. Xbox Series S is an interesting counterpoint though. Despite being the weakest of the next-gen hardware, it plays Cyberpunk consistently at a stable pace. It's the last-gen version of the game I mentioned before, but that lets Series S target a more confident 1080p to 1296p at 30 frames per second that doesn't dip as harshly as other platforms. It's not the best performance, but it is one of the more stable ones among the consoles. If you don't mind not having the best visuals but can comfortably rely on the performance, Series S is a viable option. Lastly, there's the Xbox Series X, my personal favorite console experience I've had with Cyberpunk 2077. This console allowed for either a quality mode that focused on resolution or a performance mode that focuses on 60 frames per second performance at a lower resolution. Performance mode lost the resolution to 1080p, but in return you get an unlocked frame rate targeting 60 FPS, and for the most part, it does reach that mark, though it does dip a bit more on occasion than the PS5. Curiously, the Xbox Series X does seem to have more dense NPC populations though, so clearly the settings between PS5 and Xbox Series X aren't one-to-one. In terms of the resolution mode, Series X locks to 30 FPS that ranges between a resolution of 1512p and 1800p. Lastly, there's PC, the best way to play if you can afford some top-of-the-line hardware to run this game. If you're wondering what's the bare minimum you should get to have a stable performance, not necessarily the best performance, look toward an RTX 2060. This, along with a capable CPU, can see metrics of DLSS 1440p, 60 frames per second, with some moderately decent graphical settings. Even 4K 30 FPS can be reached when some settings brought down. However, even with the right horsepower, you can still expect occasional game crashes or weird glitches like floating cigarettes, for example. Now that covers the performance, but what's the actual game itself like? Well, under a platform like a PS5 or a Series X, you get a glimpse of the beautiful world that CD Projekt Red has crafted here. Some of the effects are turned down, sure, but even at this level, it's easy to get lost in driving through Night City and taking in the sights with its people. Night City isn't as wide or expansive as the world of The Witcher, but it's densely populated from the towering buildings to the neon-covered advertisements everywhere, and it's only better displayed in the capable PC hardware. Characters, even those of NPCs, feel immaculately detailed and authentic when up close and personal during these more pivotal cutscenes. Accompanied by the built-in photo mode, it was easy to get engulfed in this intricately crafted world. The world of Cyberpunk 2077 is what I imagined a grudge futuristic Los Angeles would be like. The densely populated areas with looming skyscrapers in downtown LA, while the more community-heavy areas like East LA remind me of the outskirts of Night City. This overarching city landscape was at the forefront of this adventure, hearing the crowds of people in the background as cars zoomed on by. It all helped the all-encompassing vistas come to life. Likewise, it's the voices of the cast that help bring the characters to life. These voice actors, whichever you choose, both did a great job at capturing these multiple backgrounds, whether it was Nomad, Corpo, or Street Kid. While my initial playthrough was from a Street Kid perspective, going back and playing Corpo, I was shocked to see how well these actors were able to quickly change perspective with these different character circumstances, making them likable or maybe a complete dick. That brings me to one of the most famous voices in Cyberpunk 2077, Keanu Reeves playing Johnny Silverhands. Keanu does an alright job playing the rockstar cross-terrorist. While Keanu is no doubt a talented action star playing through Cyberpunk, I couldn't help but shake this feeling that his character was a self-aware video game Keanu. His line delivery was a bit rigid and just didn't feel like an actual character within the world at times. His performance does seem to get better throughout the campaign, but in the early hours of Johnny's introduction, I couldn't help but feel his performance delivery was as obvious as product placement. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game with a ton of promise, but one that also drops the ball. It's no secret that this game was hyped to the point of never being able to meet expectations, but that's not this review. On console, Cyberpunk 2077 is unplayable on about 41% of the install base that pre-ordered it on console, though some lucky players are playing a bearable experience on PS5 or Xbox Series X or S. PC on the other hand does get closer to that vision that was originally advertised, but even then, Cyberpunk runs into bugs, hard crashes, even on the most powerful PC rigs. That's not to say that Cyberpunk 2077 isn't a fantastic game filled with beautiful visuals, stunning presentation, great characters, and a story that kept me captivated to the point of going back and getting 2 more completely different endings. Cyberpunk 2077 is a great game, but one plagued with performance issues, glitches, and crashes that disrupt the otherwise fantastic experience on PC, a pretty good experience on next-gen consoles, and a terrible experience on anything lower. For the first time on my channel, this review is going to have 3 different review scores depending on your platform, and I think you can see why.